Hello and welcome to the Sunday Guardian show by Joyeeta Basu. I am Joyeeta Basu, the editor of the Sunday Guardian newspaper published from New Delhi. Today, unlike what I do normally in my shows where I discuss and analyze on my own, we have a very special guest, Professor Madhav Das Nalapat, who is an expert on not just on China, who is an expert on geopolitics. You ask him everything and he knows everything. So the thing is that if we can start, this week in Sunday Guardian, although he does not like to advertise the fact, but the fact of the matter is that he is our editorial director as well, apart from being UNESCO Peace Chair with Manipal University. Now, this week he has written a very interesting article where he is talking about at SCO in the Sunday Guardian. Now, he is talking about at SCO, Xi and Modi differed over their views on Ukraine. Now, Professor Nalapat, if we can take off our discussion from there. Now, when you are talking about, you have written one sentence that given their record of mistaking what they wish for as what is, the Atlanticist media immediately reached the conclusion that Xi's concerns were the same as Modi's. This is about the SCO summit where Modi told Putin that, this is not the age of war. The Western media immediately, and after which, of course, actually Putin said that Xi Jinping had certain concerns about the Ukraine war, and immediately the Western media came to the conclusion that this was because Sir Xi Jinping had also said something similar to what Mr. Modi had told Mr. Putin. So what is your information? And I know that you have a lot of information, so please tell us.
Well, Joyeeta, in the first place, I'd like to say that I'm honored to be the editorial director of the ITV Media Network. It's a great network, and they have some really good outlets. NewsX is definitely among them. Sunday Guardian, of course, is very much among them, and I think the principal reason why Sunday Guardian is doing so well is because of the capability and competence of the editor. I'm not going to name the editor, but I'm privileged to have her as well on this particular panel. Look, Joyeeta, I'd like to say that as soon as these reports surfaced, if I'm not mistaken, on 24th or something, I was immediately interviewed by a television channel, Republic channel, and they interviewed me, and then of course I had some friends of mine had forwarded some tweets to me, some posts to me, and of course I did check back with some individuals, etc., and I was, I think, alone for many of the panels, in which I said very clearly, I don't believe there's any coup. I don't believe that she's in any trouble at all. And I was the odd person out for saying that, but that was based on the intel I had, including from within that particular country. So I'm glad that developments subsequently have resulted in a lot more people signing on to that particular bandwagon, that there was really no question of a coup. There were some reports about a coup. And I just like to give as a preface, what are the theories regarding the origin of those reports? A lot of individuals have pointed to Falun Gong, which, as you know, was outlawed in China during Jiang Zemin's time. And the Falun Gong people were treated abysmally and continue to be treated abysmally and very cruelly since that period. You have instances in which living individuals have been, basically their organs are harvested while they're still alive. And they're kept alive, even after, let's say, kidneys removed, they're kept alive. Sometimes the heart is removed. Obviously, you can't be alive anymore if the heart is removed. They've been treated in a terrible way, but of course, that particular kind of treatment, the treatment of Tibetans, the treatment of Uyghurs has received a lot of attention, but somehow the treatment of Falun Gong has not received their attention. But I don't believe it was the Falun Gong, quite frankly. If you look at the Epoch Times, which is their newspaper, the newspaper funded by very rich overseas Chinese who are in the Falun Gong. Well, I think it's on the 24th, if I recall, that they really started. They basically were talking about this as rumor, not as fact. My own theory, and it's only a theory, is that this was floated by some disgruntled elements in the Chinese Communist Party itself. It's interesting that they were floated in Nepal. Why? Because, Nepal, Cameroon, Bolivia, these are countries where the Communist Party of China sends individuals who they feel are not particularly worthy of going to prestigious spots. The Chinese Communist Party believes that we are in the 19th century, and they believe North America and Europe are the most prestigious spots.
Yeah.
Australia, of course, is a very prestigious spot, and New Zealand, because they are ethnic European. And, Nepal is not considered to be a prestigious spot, except by the PLA. And the only important people in that particular embassy are people in the Chinese Secret Service, the intelligence services, and the PLA intelligence services that deal with external intelligence, and their own security services that deal with domestic intelligence. So in my view, it has been tracked to Nepal, and quite possibly some of these disgruntled elements floated this rumor, essentially in a way of thumbing their nose at Xi Jinping and his group. I mean, they were quite aware that Xi Jinping is going to get a third term, and then he's going to be trying for a fourth term, which is why the period of his third term is going to be very problematic for the world, because he will be anxious to get a fourth term. And we all know that if you look at, for example, the history of India, you look at Mrs. Indira Gandhi, she came to power, and in the second term, she was a little nervous about holding on to power. And therefore, she did many things that she may not have done in her first term. So it's in Xi Jinping's case, the third term may bring out some of his more aggressive instinct. But the fact is, in my view, disgruntled elements in the Chinese Communist Party, it may not be Nepal, it may be, Guangzhou or anywhere else. But disgruntled elements are behind this rumor, and that was done basically to humiliate Xi before the international audience. Don't forget, the Chinese are very similar to what we were until about the 1980s.
Right.
The end of the 1980s. We were very, very, although we claim to dislike them a lot, and we claim not to respect their opinion, the fact is that unless you have a chop of approval from Europe or from the United States, you are not acknowledged as an expert in India, quite frankly. I mean, some of us, thank you for referring to my very meager expertise in geopolitics. I'd like to say that until I got the chop of being fairly widely recognized in the United States and across the Atlantic, I was not really taken very seriously in India.
Right.
So the same thing has happened to me as well. But coming to your question, the fact is, and I said these are based on my sources. You know very well as the editor, I never give a source for a story. And the point is, I tell the reader, if you don't believe me, don't believe me. You can flash the story around and say this is a fable, it's fake news, it's not going to happen, because a lot of my stories are what's going to happen and what is happening. And the good news is, maybe they are just lucky guesses, but almost all those guesses, I'm not saying all, but almost all turn out to be factually accurate by sheer good luck, if I may say so.
Yeah.
My sources told me that Xi Jinping was very clear to Putin.
Yes.
He said, Comrade Putin, this is great. What you're doing is great. You're showing NATO that Russia can't be bullied. But the fact is, use all you've got and make sure you win a complete victory. Don't go in for this kind of a thing which people can say is a stalemate. Go in for the kill. That's what I would have done, and that's what you should do. Now that's a very different message from the message that Narendra Modi publicly told Mr. Putin. in full view of the world. Mr. Putin, this is not the era of war. It's the era of peace. And frankly, he was looking at Mr. Putin, but he was actually talking to somebody else, in my view. And that somebody was a gentleman called Xi Jinping, who has been extremely aggressive across the world, including in matters relating to security of India.
So, according to the information that you have, this mobilization that Putin started post the SCO summit, it was primarily because it was Xi's idea that he should go for something like that. So, how does, when we are looking at Xi Jinping, how does a war between Russia and Ukraine help Xi Jinping?
Look, Xi Jinping is someone I've studied from the time he became a member of the standing committee, and he then became in line to basically, along with 2 or 3 others, all of whom he dealt with very successfully, to become the general secretary of the party. And in China, that's the only title that counts. I don't think there is really a formal president in China, although we all call him President Xi, out of force of habit and convention. His position as general secretary is what establishes him. And the fact of the matter is that, this is a very unique individual. He was enabled to come far and fast because of Jiang Zemin and Jiang Zemin faction, because they believed that he was business friendly. And when he was, in charge of a province that was very, Fujian, which was very, very business friendly, when he was looking after a lot of things there, and incidentally that a lot of Taiwanese businesses set up there, and he provided a very welcoming environment to Taiwanese businessmen to give jobs to China and to give incomes to China, which the Taiwanese happily did. But the fact is that it is Jiang Zemin who was instrumental in seeing that he became general secretary and not Li Keqiang, who was essentially Hu Jintao's candidate. Hu Jintao did not want Xi. That's not really a state secret. Everybody knows it. Everybody who's been following China knows it. But Jiang Zemin and the Shanghai Group and others got together. And this is what is very interesting about Mr. Xi Jinping. The people he went after in the most direct way were the individuals in the Jiang Zemin faction. It was the most powerful faction, by far more powerful than the Hu Jintao faction. And he more or less, weakened that faction incredibly, the very faction that brought him to power. That is Xi Jinping. That's the kind of individual he is. So therefore, as far as Ukraine is concerned, don't go by the spin. There's a very strong spin. If you talk about American spin meisters and you talk about European spin meisters, poor chaps, poor Ursula von der Leyen, she's being ridiculed every day. Poor Olaf Scholz, the guy is looking like a bumbling. Frankly, he's called all kinds of names in Germany because he is making sure Germany is going to become a third world country during the time that he's chancellor, thanks to the geostrategic decisions he's taking. That's a different matter. But the fact is, the Chinese spin masters are masters of not only telling the world a message, but then convincing the world that this is the exact opposite message to what the Chinese want you to believe. So they tell you something which they want you to believe and make you believe that this is precisely the opposite of what they themselves want to believe. The reality is, this war has come as a godsend to China. Why? Because it has taken the oxygen away from the Indo-Pacific back to the Atlantic. It has taken the attention away from China back to Russia. It's a godsend for China. But the reality is that they want the relationship between Russia and the Western world, what I call the Atlanticists, both sides of the Atlantic. I think, Western, Eastern, Northern, Southern, it's a question of perception. But Atlanticists, the 2 shores of the Atlantic, they want these 2 shores of the Atlantic to be permanently hostile to Russia. And they believe that if this war is turbocharged, then that will happen, and there will be this permanent split between the Russian Federation and the Atlantics, which will be to the benefit of China. Because then the Russians are completely, beholden to China, and the West will need China because they do not dare want to confront hostile China when they have assumed and they have created a hostile Russia. So this war is a dream come true for Xi Jinping.
So when you are talking about a breach between Russia and a kind of a permanent breach, are you talking in terms of a possible nuclear attack, the use of tactical nuclear weapons by Putin in Ukraine?
Look, Joyeeta, first of all, I'd like to tell you that today, you don't have a country is not involved in an existential war unless it's an all-out nuclear war, in which case it becomes existential. Let's obviate that particular possibility. It's too horrible to contemplate. What we talk about in an existential concept is a systemic war. When there was a Cold War between the US and the USSR, my term was Cold War 1.0 and Cold War 2.0. And Cold War 2.0, I don't believe anybody used it before I did, and now it's all over the place. But the reality is, it was a war between two systems, the Soviet system and the American system, roughly, very roughly. And the Soviet system, large elements of Soviet system were transplanted into India by Jawaharlal Nehru and carried out by his successors. A lot of central planning, a lot of the government controls that are still there, a lot of the architecture of full control. The Reserve Bank, for example, is still insistent on controlling things that it just cannot control, such as the crypto world. It tried to do some controls over the crypto world, with the result that almost all Indian crypto platforms and Indian crypto holders have now migrated to other platforms, most of them to a Chinese platform. So what does that mean? It means the Chinese PLA has got access to knowledge about the crypto holdings of Indians that the government of India has no knowledge of. And that has happened because of this over-regulation by the RBI. Well, forget it. I'm not going to talk about regulation in India. I've been talking about it 30 years. No one listened to me. No one's going to listen to me now also. But what I want to say quite clearly is that they would like to, what is the objective of China here? Objective of China is to ensure that it can get away with consolidating its position in the Eurasian continent and consolidating its position in the Indo-Pacific. Now, things happen which don't go according to plan, and quite frankly, the Ukrainian war has resulted, and COVID have resulted in huge problems for the Belt and Road project. But remember one thing, Joyeeta, please remember one thing. When we talk about huge logistical problems, the Chinese don't care. All they're looking at is the money they gave to the countries building these assets. And that money, Joyeeta, is dollar denominated.
Yes.
You have the Chinese Communist Party, which is now trying to shift from the dollar. I've been saying this for some time, including on NewsX and in Sunday Guardian, de-dollarize. But at the same time, the BRI is entirely, all the BRI loans are dollar denominated. What does that mean? When the dollar rises, the debt to China of about 60 to 70 different countries rises proportionately, which means that it is even going to be even more difficult for them to repay, which means because the value of the dollar is so much higher, the value of their assets will be lower, so the Chinese can grab even more assets with the rise in the price of the dollar. So don't look at BRI as a question of logistics, X going to Y city. It's also a question of money. This money is dollar denominated.
Right.
And now with the rise of the dollar, the debt to China has become even more unbearable, which means the ability of China to grab assets in as many as 60 to 70 countries. Frankly, I can't calculate because some of these BRI projects are a little opaque, but it's between 60 and 70 countries. That ability has gone up significantly.
Right.
So let's be honest. The Ukraine war the logistical problems it has created, the rise in the price of the dollar, consequent on COVID and the Ukraine war, all this belt tightening by the Fed, and now you've got competitive belt tightening by other central banks. This is going to lead to a Great Depression, frankly. You had this kind of competitive belt tightening during the Great Depression of the 1930s, and you're seeing the same formula being worked out now. I don't know why central banks don't learn anything from history, but that's the way, I guess, central bankers are. But the reality is, the Chinese have now got their dollar debt. And the higher the dollar rises, the greater the debt of so many countries to China. Uncle Xi must be a very, very happy man while he's pretending to be terribly unhappy and terribly sad at the state of the world.
Now here I want to ask a question. When you are talking about why we should be more worried about the third term for Xi, because he wants a fourth term, I mean, obviously there is going to be opposition. Now, to overcome that, so what exactly, when you are talking about fear, are the two countries that should be quote unquote afraid the most or worried the most are Taiwan and India? What is exactly do you think that she will go to war with these countries?
Look, I would not use the word fear. I would like to use the word prepared. Right. I think Taiwan and India need to be definitely among the countries that are prepared the most, together with Japan, together with the United States. Definitely these four countries, India, Taiwan, United States, and Japan, they are the ones that need to be the most concerned and the most, if I may say so, attentive to what is going on in China. Why? Because the Chinese Communist Party is not the Congress Party. The Congress Party, frankly, after, from the time of Jawaharlal Nehru, in fact, Lal Bahadur Shastri came, had he lasted for 5 years, it would have been different. But he went away in Tashkent under circumstances that even today the people of India have not been informed about. We've not been informed about a lot of details about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose either. I don't know if it's because the government of India doesn't have the details or won't share the details. I don't know, but we haven't been informed, period, about how Shastri Ji, what happened to him at Tashkent suddenly. And we haven't been informed about Bose either. But let's not go into that. The fact of the matter is that the Chinese Communist Party is not the Congress Party, which will never, it's impossible for an individual who has been steeped in the culture of the Congress Party to really believe that there can be a Congress without the Nehru family. It's a Gandhi family is a misnomer, because actually a lot of people abroad think this is Mahatma Gandhi was actually the great grandfather of Rajiv Gandhi or Rahul Gandhi. I'm afraid the Mahatma had no relationship with either Rahul or Rajiv, who, by the way, was a wonderful guy and a really wonderful guy, but anyway, too bad for that. But all I can say is that it is more like the BJP. The BJP is a party that will follow a leader, definitely, and it is following Narendra Modi beautifully in a way in which, if I may say so, Narendra Modi has got even more of, if I may say so, I would not like to use the word control, but I'd like to use the word influence over the BJP than Atal Bihari Vajpayee had. And that was a lot of influence, frankly. And Narendra Modi has got even much more influence. But the reality is that this is a party that is not the Congress Party. And Narendra Modi is not a dynast. He didn't come from a politically connected family. He had neither money nor power in his family. He came from nowhere, he came by himself, and he came to the top. That's a story like, that is a tremendous story in itself. But the fact is, in this party, if things go wrong, after a point, when Vajpayee, for example, faced a tremendous amount of opposition within the RSS, I know. I don't want to name individuals, but very big people in the RSS were very unhappy with Mr. Vajpayee. And they made their unhappiness very clear to Mr. Vajpayee. And Mr. Vajpayee was unhappy with them, but he could do nothing about it. for the simple reason that the BJP is not the Congress party. Mr. Vajpayee, his great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, and father, no, they were not BJP, leaders. Although I must confess, there are a bit too many BJP leaders now who are, grandsons or whatever, or the sons of BJP leaders. I think it's not a great thing. There are some people who are outstanding in that crowd. There are a lot of others who are not. So the fact is, Xi Jinping third term is unprecedented in the post Deng Xiaoping. Mao was a lifetime chairman of the party. I don't believe that there were any term limits during Mao's time. So Mao didn't break any rule by continuing until he frankly died of natural causes. But after that, Deng Xiaoping did not want another Mao who was so smothering in his influence, and he introduced two-term limit. The United States also has got a two-term limit after Franklin Roosevelt, you remember. And these two terms are designed that after 10 years, an individual his head should not turn at power, and therefore 2 terms is enough. So that was a theory. Now, the fact is, it's a theory which frankly, some individuals get turned on by power in the very first week they become powerful. Some individuals don't get turned on even if they are in power for 20 years. It's a question of individual, but they said 2 terms. Xi Jinping is on track to break that rule on the 16th of October.
Right.
I mean, even on this controversy, when I was asked, what do you think? Frankly, on some panels, I think including on one panel with NewsX, I think if I'm not mistaken, Devika Chopra was the anchor there. And I had, in fact, I got about 10 minutes notice to appear on that panel. So I said, okay, I'll come for a short while. And everybody else was talking about the coup and Xi Jinping is now history. I said, hold on, guys. I don't believe it. And I gave my contra take, and of course logged out because I had other things to do, which I had to attend to, which were pre-scheduled, and they were waiting for me to complete I waited for a chance. Finally, I was given a chance to speak. I had my say. So I'd like to say a third term is unprecedented. A fourth term would be a revolutionary in the context of Chinese Communist Party.
Right.
Xi Jinping, once he's on the tiger of a third term, it is going to be difficult for him to dismount that tiger because he has made himself so unpopular by wanting a third term that if he's out of power, he'll be eaten alive by people in the party who are upset with him. So he will desperately need a fourth term. He may do anything for that fourth term, including kinetic operation in Taiwan or in the Himalayas. That is why I'm saying both Taiwan and India and Japan, which is very concerned with Taiwan, United States very concerned with India, these 4 countries need to be very attentive to see after Xi's third term starts, that's when, in my view, the danger point starts.
So, when we are talking about the Quad countries, in particular these 4 countries, which according to you, when it comes to tackling China, handling China, is the weakest link? We have just about, I think, 8 or 9 minutes left, so we have to rush through a bit, but if you can just tell me, which is the weakest link? Do you think the weakest link right now is the US under Joe Biden, or is it the Japanese under the new Prime Minister? So, or do you think it's India? It cannot be India, definitely.
No, look, first of all, I don't believe there's a weak link at all, although I would like to say that look at Shinzo Abe's, the tragedy. I mean, he was killed. And he was the one person who was very clear in saying publicly what every Japanese leader knows privately, which is that if the Chinese attack Taiwan, Japan will have to enter the fight. United States have to enter the fight because the knowledge economy runs on Taiwanese chips. You can't do without them. And they cannot allow Taiwan to go to the grip of the communist China. The United States cannot allow India to be humiliated by China. In 1962, there was no problem. India was neutral, non-aligned. United States were humiliated or not humiliated. They really didn't care, frankly. But today, it's a different matter. although we hesitate to use the term, I mean, we are an ally of the United States.
Right.
We are a military ally of the United States. That's a fact. And that's why, for example, Minister Jaishankar, the foreign minister of India, was welcomed by the Secretary of Defense, you know, in the United States, to the Pentagon with an honor guard, because it's a today the most important security relationship with the United States is the relationship with India. US cannot afford to see India humiliate. What will be Xi's game plan? Humiliate India so that the leadership of India is challenged. And you know, the perception is that if the leadership is humiliated, then what happened in '62? The entire mystique and of Jawaharlal Nehru faded away. He became, I mean, completely in the public mind. He was diminished, horribly diminished. And after that, that opened the door to '67. I mean, Lal Bahadur Shastri came, of course, and to some extent rejuvenated things. In '65, he was brilliant. And then, of course, he came back and to Nehru's daughter, but Nehru's daughter lost so many important states in '67, and she lost the whole country in '77. The mystique of the Nehrus had gone.
Yeah.
And this is the point. They want a humiliation of India, and above all, Xi Jinping has made it a prestige matter to have control of Taiwan. Very unwisely, he said, during the time I am here, I would like to see this control. Other leaders were smarter. They didn't give a time limit. And Mao, frankly, there was a time when he said publicly, Taiwan is not a part of China, which is a reality. It's not a part of China. But Mao said that publicly. Xi Jinping has said publicly, I will grab Taiwan during the time I am General Secretary. So in his third term, people are going to say, hey, you're in your third term. What has happened to you? And don't forget, just as Putin is under attack from the right wing, from the hawks, who feel he's being too lenient to the Ukrainians, Xi is under attack in his party, not for those who feel he's aggressive on Taiwan, but because those who feel he's too soft on Taiwan.
Right, right. So basically what, if I can just ask one, we have to continue this discussion on another day, but one quick question. So this Mr. Joe Biden, the US president, is constantly accused of being soft to China, you know, appeasing China. So how is it sitting when you are looking at what Mr. Xi Jinping is planning, and when you see, I mean, how steadfast is US in terms of ensuring that China doesn't come to control the world, or doesn't want actually displace US as the #1 power in the world?
It's very steadfast because the US system is not the Chinese system. Frankly, even if the entire Biden family were in the pocket of China, and I know there are a lot of individuals who have had financial transactions with China, quite a lot of them among Biden's family and friends, but it doesn't matter. Biden himself is a very peace-loving man, and he honestly believes, like the European Union believes, that Xi is the great peacemaker and Putin is the warmonger. The poor chaps have got it entirely wrong. But the fact is the US system is a much stronger system than that. One White House cannot decide. The Congress cannot decide. The judiciary cannot. The judiciary has given the biggest gift to the Democratic Party by being opposed to the Democratic Party and by doing this absurdly ridiculous anti-freedom decision of doing away Roe v. Wade. Those 6 judges have behaved as, if I may say so, theological fanatics of the 19th century. They have not behaved like jurists, and they have given a golden gift to the Democrats, frankly. So the fact is, in the United States today, the public know what China is. The legislators are forced to go along because they depend on the public. And whatever the executive may think, the Chinese system has been buy up people in the, at the top. But in a democracy, if the bottom roars, the top has to listen. Joe Biden has to listen. He and Kamala Harris said some horrible things about Prime Minister Modi. The minute it became President Biden and Vice President Harris, they became the best friends of Narendra Modi. Why? Because you need Narendra Modi for security in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay, I think our time is almost up, so we will have to end this today. but we have to basically, the message is that we have to be prepared for Xi Jinping's third term, because that is the time when he is likely to be most malign, if we can use that word. So all of us will have to be prepared, and for that Quad has a long way to go. They will have to prepare themselves in terms of a security alliance, also possibility without calling ourselves a security alliance, and that is the tricky part with all of us, we know. Thank you so much for appearing on this show, Professor Nalapat. We will again talk some other time. Thank you again.
Thank you, Joyeeta. It's always a pleasure to appear frankly on a show with you. Your views are very direct and very refreshing.
Thank you so much.
God bless you. Take care.
Thank you.